Because you only finished middle school, you ended up in such a low-end job, right? Well, no. Poor thing. Why are you here, Samantha? I came here for an interview. I'm currently working in an IT company, but I want to advance my career. Career advancement. Yes. I graduated from Harvard University and got a decent job, but I wanted to do more. I really resonated with the company values here, but I guess you wouldn't understand. Talking about IT stuff to a janitor like you, dressed in work clothes, would be totally over your head. Do you clean hair every day? The woman looking down on me suddenly had an expression I had never seen before. The story goes back to when I was a middle school student. My name is Michael Johnson. I was born into an ordinary family with a father, a mother, and a younger brother. I loved my family, was fairly good at studies, excelled in the soccer team, and had a fun middle school life. I was relatively popular among friends, and bullying was something I was never involved in. Going to school every day was fun, and I loved spending time at home because my family got along well. Even though my life seemed smooth sailing, there was one thing that didn't go well. It was about Samantha. Samantha was beautiful, smart, and athletic. At first, I even thought I liked her. In a romantic sense. Since Samantha and I were always competing for the top ranks in our grades, I felt a sense of camaraderie, and besides, she was beautiful, so I couldn't help but follow her with my eyes. Yet, Samantha disliked me. Despite getting along with almost everyone else, Samantha was the only one who seemed to detest me. The first time I realized this was during a seat change. We were just fresh into middle school, and the seats determined by a lottery put Samantha and me one behind the other. Samantha was in front, and I was behind. I was happy, thinking I got a chance to talk to the beautiful Samantha. The first time we spoke was when Samantha passed a handout back to me. Thanks, Samantha, you're surprisingly tall. What do you mean surprisingly? No, you're so slim, so you don't look that tall from a distance. Oh, really? That was so cold, and kind of rude, was my first impression. Despite her beauty, it was a bit disappointing. There were a few more occasions to talk after that, but she was just as unfriendly then. For example, when Samantha and I scored the top marks in a test, Mr. Miller said something like this. This time, Samantha is second and Michael is first. It's great to have both the top students in this class. You two should make the most of this fortunate environment. Come on, Mr. Miller, you should be teaching us properly, right, Samantha? Just because you're in first place, you're so full of yourself. I won't lose next time. I tried to talk to Samantha with a sense of camaraderie, but she seemed to see me as an adversary. When we were both chosen as class representatives because we were smart, she would never go to the committee meetings with me. And when we had to work together, she was distant in a way you wouldn't expect from classmates. It made me wonder if she disliked being with me that much. The decisive moment was when I accidentally overheard a conversation among the girls. Hey, don't you think Michael is cool? Yeah, I get it. He seems like he can do anything, kind of like a hero from comic book. Is everyone aiming for him? The competition is too fierce for me, but Samantha could be a match, right? True. The only one who matches him would be Samantha. Samantha is definitely the most popular girl among us. Michael sometimes looks at her, doesn't he? So, what do you think, Samantha? Is he an option? What are you talking about? Me, with Michael? Impossible. I don't get why he's popular at all. Really? That's surprising. Yeah. The only high-spec guy who could match Samantha would be Michael, right? Stop it, please. So, I'm really out of the question, huh? Hearing Samantha outright dismiss me like that was a shock. I had no idea why she disliked me so much, but Samantha continued to avoid me and was always cold towards me. My middle school life, where everything but my relationship with Samantha was going well, changed drastically in my third year. My father was in a traffic accident. He hovered between life and death but managed to survive, though he was so badly injured that he couldn't continue his previous job. My mother, who had been a homemaker, started working part-time as a result. My father's long rehabilitation journey began, and our family finances gradually became tighter. Although I was in my third year of middle school and facing exams, I started to consider giving up on high school. It wasn't just because of our financial difficulties, but also because of my younger brother. He loved playing with computers and had a dream of becoming an engineer, even though he was still young. To make his dream come true, he needed to go to university. If I gave up on high school and started working right after middle school, maybe I could support my brother's education. Once I started thinking this way, my decision was made. After my father's accident, when my mother started working part-time, I began a newspaper delivery job. A kind gentleman there offered to introduce me to a cleaning company run by an acquaintance, so I decided to work there after graduating from middle school. When I told my parents, they strongly opposed. They argued that I should at least finish high school, perhaps with a scholarship, before finding a job, especially since I had good grades and they really wanted me to go to university. Eventually, my parents even apologized to me, saying, "We're sorry for putting you in this situation." At that time, I didn't consider my circumstances unfortunate. I had purely decided to do what I could for my beloved family, so in a way, it was what I wanted. After convincing my parents, I started working at the cleaning company. It was tougher than I had imagined at first. I had naively thought that cleaning would be something I could handle, even with just a middle school education, but I was wrong. Working in society was not easy. It was different from my part-time newspaper delivery job. But because the people at the cleaning company were so kind, I was able to learn the job properly and continue working. A lot of time has passed since then. I'm still working in building maintenance. The entrance to the building prominently displayed a sign for interview venue. Today, the company that owns this building was scheduled to conduct mid-career interviews, and one after another, people in suits entered through the automatic doors. As I was wiping the windows of my work clothes, I spotted a familiar face among them. It was nostalgic. The only classmate who disliked me back in middle school, Samantha. She had become significantly more beautiful as an adult, but her features were unmistakable, and I recognized her at a glance. I wondered if she would notice me as I continued to wipe the windows. Then, Samantha approached me and said, "Michael." "Oh, Samantha, long time no see. Because you only finished middle school, you ended up in such a low-end job, right?" "Well, no, poor thing." Why are you here, Samantha?" "I came here for an interview. I'm currently working in an IT company, but I want to advance my career." "Career advancement?" "Yes. I graduated from a prestigious university and got a decent job, but I wanted to do more. I really resonated with the company values here, but I guess you wouldn't understand. Talking about IT stuff to a janitor like you, dressed in work clothes, would be totally over your head. Do you clean here every day?" "Well, Just as I was about to respond, a woman in a suit hurried over to us. "President Johnson." "What?" Samantha's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at me. I had never seen such an expression from her during our middle school days. "Mr. Johnson, you're cleaning hair again, I see. So you, who came for the interview today, Samantha, was it? You can leave now. It's unacceptable to show such disrespect to our president." "President? Well, sorry about that, Samantha. I didn't mean to deceive you, but I'm the president of this company." "What do you mean?" "While working at the cleaning company, I also earned my high school and university degrees. I climbed the ranks within the cleaning company, got involved in management, and my skills led me to become the president. In the process, I found something I wanted to do and started another company. I gathered talented engineers to develop cleaning equipment and robots. When I started the business, I approached my brother, who had become a skilled engineer, to join me. The products developed by this company became huge hits, rapidly gaining recognition. Although I'm the president, I'm not comfortable in the limelight, so I left media interviews to my vice president brother, leading many to mistake him for the president. I suppose Samantha was also under that impression. After I explained everything, Samantha looked astonished. "So, that was it. But why are you cleaning hair dressed like that?" "Oh, I wanted to test a new product we made, and I thought it'd be nice to watch the interviewees coming in today, so I decided to multitask." "I see. That's so like you, Michael." Samantha seemed convinced in a strange way. The woman in the suit, my secretary Lucy, continued. "Mr. Johnson, we can send her away without question, right? Someone who looks down on others with such arrogance doesn't belong in our company." Now, the first interview hasn't even started yet, so let's just proceed with it normally. She graduated from Harvard University, and she's genuinely interested in our company's philosophy and has things she wants to achieve by joining us. But Mr. Johnson, let's keep what happened here between us. I want the interviewers to assess her based on a fair perspective. If they deem her a valuable asset to our company, I intend to hire her." "Understood." Although Lucy seemed reluctant, she agreed. Samantha then headed towards the interview location. Later, I met Samantha again. Indeed, Samantha had passed our company's selection process. Among many applicants, she earned her place. I thought to myself, just as I expected. Throughout middle school, I had seen Samantha's efforts firsthand. Before tests, she would go to the local library alone and study from morning till evening, and I often saw her practicing her club activities alone. Despite achieving good results, she never boasted in front of others or looked down on anyone. She got along very well with other classmates, so I knew she wasn't an arrogant person. Probably, I did something to offend her and ended up being disliked. After greeting the new employees as their president, Samantha stopped me. "Mr. Johnson, Samantha, congratulations on joining us. Could I have a moment of your time later?" "Yeah, sure." When I met with Samantha later, she apologized sincerely for her behavior the other day. "I'm truly sorry for my behavior that day." "Oh, no, it's fine. And you don't need to be so formal with me when it's just the two of us. You can treat me as a classmate, just like before." "I can do that." "You're still as serious as ever. I've been thinking, were you okay with joining a company run by me, whom you greatly disliked? I mean, we did go through with the interview, but knowing I was the president must have been somewhat unpleasant for you, and I thought you might even decide to withdraw from the interview process." "What? Dislike? Yeah, you've disliked me since middle school, haven't you?" "No, that's not it at all." "What? It's the opposite. I liked you, Michael, and because I liked you, I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't be myself around you. Really. I was too embarrassed. I really wanted to talk more with you, Michael, and become friends, but the more I thought about it, the more distant my behavior became. I never imagined you thought I disliked you." "What? It totally seemed like you disliked me. I was so worried about what I might have done." "Well, I'm sorry." No, it's all good." At this moment, our misunderstanding was finally cleared up. Curious, I asked Samantha when and why she started liking me. It turns out, before we started middle school, Samantha was being harassed by an older boy during a holiday. He was demanding her contact information and wouldn't let her leave without it, grabbing her and not letting go. Apparently, I happened to pass by and intervened to help her. Back then, driven by a strong sense of justice, I often stepped in to help classmates in trouble, so honestly, I didn't remember that particular incident very well, but for Samantha, that was the moment she fell for me. To her, I was like a hero. So, that's what happened. To think I hated you, but with my attitude back then, it's understandable why you'd think that. I'm sorry. No, I'm the one who misunderstood, thinking you hated me, but I'm glad that wasn't the case. I never imagined that after all this time, Samantha and I would reconcile and even become friends. For a while, Samantha and I didn't interact directly. My work became increasingly demanding, and I was swamped every day. Samantha was also busy learning various aspects of her new job. Occasionally, I'd hear phrases like that new mid-career hire is amazing, so I knew Samantha was quickly making her mark in the company. And then, on the day it was decided to launch a new project, Samantha's name came up during the executive meeting about the project team members. I think she's a great fit. She's new, but she's really capable. The executives, unaware that Samantha and I were classmates, explained how talented she was. I agreed to appoint Samantha as a project leader. My brother, with a sly grin, also agreed. I had confided in my brother about Samantha, and his continued smirking made me slightly regret sharing. This project was the biggest yet, so I often received progress updates and offered advice. Naturally, as the project leader, Samantha was the one reporting to me. Initially, our interactions were purely professional. That concludes this report. Thank you. Let me know if anything comes up. Will do. However, as we met more frequently, we started exchanging a few more words, and eventually, we even made small talk. Good to hear things are going smoothly. Yes, thanks to everyone's competence. Hey, Samantha, have you had lunch yet? Not yet. How about we go to this amazing Chinese place I know? I thought you'd be into more fancy or upscale dining. What are you talking about? The fried rice and dumplings there are the best. I go there 3 times a week. Then, I'll happily accept the treat. And just like that, we started having meals together. Samantha became someone I could rely on at work and enjoy talking to. Finally, the project was a success. Thanks to Samantha's leadership, the project proceeded smoothly and significantly boosted our company's revenue. To celebrate this success, a team dinner was organized. The party was a blast, and despite the insistence of my colleagues, I joined the after party, which was rare for me. When there were calls for a third round, I politely declined, and Samantha, having led the team, also gracefully excused herself, saying, "I'll be heading home now." While some lamented the leader's departure, Samantha smiled apologetically and waved goodbye to everyone. I felt nostalgic, remembering how Samantha had always been kind and friendly to everyone but me. Seizing the opportunity as she was leaving, I called out to her. "Samantha, since you're heading home, how about we go together?" "Yes." Nobody is around anymore, so it's fine to interact as classmates. Though, I don't mind if you keep up your assertive attitude at the company. I can act like that towards the president. Besides, I never wanted to be that way. I see. The old be mean to the ones you like tactic, right? Hey, don't get carried away. Sorry. By the way, Michael, why did you start working right after middle school? I always thought you would go to the same high school as me. After all, your grades were good. Well, for the first time, I shared with Samantha why I decided to work after middle school and what had happened to my family. Samantha listened intently, nodding along as I spoke. It must have been tough for you. Well, it was at first, but now, being a president and having to pay salaries to so many employees, it's a different kind of challenge. I guess there's always something challenging, no matter the time. Michael, you're amazing. That hasn't changed. You have this enlightened outlook, which I've always found really cool. Really? Even though you said you liked me back then. How about now? What? I like you, Samantha. I had fallen for Samantha. Actually, I think I probably liked her even back in middle school. I had given up, thinking she disliked me. When I confessed, Samantha nodded and said, "Me too." And so, after decades, our feelings aligned and we began dating. Back then, I wasn't sure how things would turn out, but now, I'm happy. I enjoy my work, have time with the person I love, and feel fulfilled. It's great to have a competitive environment with my brother. My father has become much more active after his rehabilitation, and I can provide enough support to ease my mother's burden. People make mistakes and sometimes make the wrong choices. Life can throw unexpected events at us, but we can always start over, no matter how many times it takes. I want to approach everything with an open heart and move forward with a positive attitude. That's what I learned from my life. When something happens, rather than getting emotional, I wish people would take a moment to accept things as they are. Because things might just turn around for the better. This is to freshen up your pool-looking self. The client called Brandon threw beer at me. He had the worst personality. The people from his workplace also threw beer at me, and I've reached my limit. I wonder how much trouble he needs to cause us before he's satisfied. Due to Brandon, our company went through a rough patch, and the employees he misled were also in trouble. Thinking about selfish Brandon always made me furious. So, I decided to get back at him. Then, the deal for $200 million is off, effective immediately. What? He looked confused, so I pointed my phone at him to ensure he could hear the playback clearly. Hearing the recorded words, Brandon's attitude changed drastically from before, and he started apologizing. But I didn't pay any attention to him. No matter what he said, I had no intention of forgiving Brandon. My name is Alex Johnson, and I'm 32 this year. I work as the CEO of a luxury watch manufacturing company. My company has rapidly grown by hitting it big with our original brand watches. It's a demanding job, but it's also very rewarding, so I'm satisfied with my work. What got me interested in this job relates back to an incident from my childhood. I had a beloved grandfather, and once his cherished large antique clock broke. That clock was a cherished possession my grandfather had since childhood. He tried various repair shops in an attempt to fix it, but unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. The clock was too old, and ultimately, no one could repair it. Seeing my grandfather sadly looking at the broken clock made me want to fix it somehow. I'll become someone who can fix any clock when I grow up. Is that so? You're kind, Alex. But don't worry about me. Pursue your own dreams. Years passed, and I ended up working in the watch industry, but I never managed to repair that antique clock, which now sits quietly in a corner of my house. My grandfather passed away when I was 20, and not being able to show him the working clock again is one of my biggest regrets. It was just before noon. I had just left the CEO's office and was on my way to the reception room. Along the way, I saw employees from different departments looking tired and chatting in the hallway. Such scenes had become common in the company. Normally, employees from different departments wouldn't have much to do with each other, but due to a staff shortage, this was now a frequent sight. This was all because a few months ago, we had to fire an employee named Brandon, who had deceived several colleagues, causing them to resign. Brandon, a man in his 50s known for his sharp gaze, always flaunted his wealth with flashy ties and watches. His work attitude was significantly worse compared to other employees, which led to his dismissal. However, after being fired, Brandon promised better opportunities at other companies to some of our talented employees. As a result, several employees took his word for it and left the company. This led to a severe staff shortage, forcing various employees to take on additional duties from other departments. Sighing as I walked, I finally arrived at the reception room. I was supposed to meet with a client at this time, but it seems they haven't arrived yet. While confirming there were no visitors inside, I spoke to a male employee who had prepared coffee in the room. It seems our client hasn't arrived yet. Jess, They called a short while ago to say they'd be about 5 minutes late, so it might take a bit longer. In this company, which is struggling with a staff shortage, even as the president, I can't afford to take it easy. That's why I'm doing the work that the sales department would normally handle, but it's started to wear me out. Probably because I've been busy lately filling in at the manufacturing plant, helping with marketing and public relations, and so on, leading to accumulated fatigue. I'm a bit tired, so I'll rest on the sofa. Please don't mind me and continue with your work. Oh yes, understood. As I sat down on the sofa in the reception room and closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. With my eyes closed, various recent events flashed through my mind. If it weren't for Brandon, the company wouldn't be in this situation. It turns out that the employees who resigned, swayed by Brandon's promises, couldn't find employment at the better company he had promised. Those who were deceived couldn't return to our company and seemed to struggle to find new jobs. While I feel sorry for their situation and don't blame them for leaving since where they work is their choice, considering the company's reputation, I couldn't simply offer help easily. So, when recruiting new talent, I plan to hire a diverse range of individuals. This means more preparations and likely even busier days ahead. As I pondered the future, the male employee who had been working in the reception room called out to me. He seemed to have been on the phone with someone while I was resting. "President Johnson, it seems the client has just arrived. I've laid out all the documents for the deal on the table." "Understood. Thanks for preparing. It might be tough since we're so busy, but hang in there until we can hire some new staff." "Yes." After sending off the employee with a bright response, the client appeared in the room a few minutes later. I stood up from the sofa to greet them, but was stopped in my tracks. The flamboyantly dressed man who entered was not the person I was expecting. The man wearing the gold tie was flaunting a luxury brand watch on his wrist as if to show it off. Furthermore, his tie-pin was adorned with a remarkably large gemstone I'd never seen before, and the wallet peeking out from his open briefcase was clearly a designer brand. However, his appearance and possessions were quite shocking. Those aspects were of little consequence. But what surprised me most was the fact that the man was Brandon, who had left the company a few months ago. Faced with this unexpected situation, I was quite confused, but as the head of a company, I couldn't afford to be lost in thought. I took a deep breath to calm myself before turning to face Brandon again. "Brandon, why are you here? It's obvious, isn't it? I'm in charge of this deal now. Can't you understand that? Oh, maybe being poor means you can't even afford a decent meal, so your brain's too slow to keep up." Hearing his rude opening remarks, I wanted to escape from reality, but I endured it for the sake of the company. Perhaps for someone who dines on steak every day thanks to his wife's money, this might be simple, but for ordinary people like us, it was a bit hard to grasp. Is that supposed to be sarcasm? Seems like poverty makes even the bitterness of defeat sound pathetic. Perhaps because I showed up with a raggedy towel when firing Brandon, he's been looking down on me, calling me poor. This digression aside, that day the air conditioning was broken, and I needed anything to wipe off my sweat. It was just something I had on hand to cope with the sweltering heat until the repair service arrived, but I never thought that alone would lead to being labeled as impoverished. In his mind, I must be living in extreme poverty, unable to afford even tomorrow's meal. Unlike me, Brandon seems to consider himself wealthy. He indulges in luxury using the money earned by his wife. Eating steak for breakfast, buying new cars, it seems he used to boast about such things to his colleagues. Despite it being his wife's earnings, he doesn't seem to find it embarrassing to brag about it. So I muttered quietly, though Brandon didn't seem to hear it. "It's not like you earned it yourself." "What was that? Did you say something?" "No, it's nothing." Brandon entered the reception room with an air of nonchalance, plopping down on the sofa. Leaning back, He crossed his legs and gestured with his eyes for me to sit as well, so, feeling tired, I decided to sit back down on the sofa. It was impossible to have a calm conversation with Brandon, but I couldn't just stand there the whole time either. "It's been a while. I haven't seen your face in months." I had to approach this not as interacting with another person, but with the patience one might use with a nonverbal child, to prevent my anger from taking over. "Are you doing sales work at your new company, just like you did here?" "Yeah, I'm cracking the whip as a manager over there. Unlike here, there are no sticklers for rules, so I've been able to work more freely." His words showed no signs of remorse or change. He's probably continuing his selfish ways at his new workplace. This reassured me that my decision to fire him was correct. If something like Brandon had continued to be in my company, other employees would have been influenced, and the company would have been corrupted. It was indeed better to have fired him sooner rather than later. However, I hadn't anticipated that he would deceive other employees and cause such significant damage to the company. "By the way, what about the others who left around the same time I did? Have they come back to your company?" Despite being the instigator, Brandon asked with feigned innocence. Suppressing the discomfort welling up inside me, I shook my head. "Of course not. It's not that simple to just let people go and then rehire them." "That's right." He laughed smugly and clapped his hands, seemingly amused. I couldn't understand Brandon's feelings at all. Having asked what I wanted to know, and not wanting to engage in any more personal conversation that would upset me, I decided to move on to the main topic. Let's switch gears then, and move on to the discussion about our deal. After that, we proceeded with the business discussion. At the end of our conversation, he stared at me intently and said, "You look quite worn out. I heard about the staff shortage. It must be tough. It's sad to see the head of my former company looking like this." Despite his words, he left the reception room with a mocking smile. Frustrated, I pounded the table in front of me with my fist. Brandon likely came here to see the state of the company. He must have had someone else switch roles with him to come here. The thought of his maliciousness in mixing personal vendettas with business made me feel sick. Around midnight, after finishing work, I returned to my apartment and headed straight for the old clock in the corner. Living alone since leaving my family home, I brought some furniture from there to help cope with homesickness. Just looking at and touching these familiar pieces of furniture from my childhood brings me comfort and reassurance. Upon closer inspection, there are lines marked with a marker indicating my growth spurts and stickers from candy wrappers stuck on them. Looking at these traces of my past life reminds me of my father, who watched me grow, and my mother, who would buy me sweets on her way back from shopping. After indulging in nostalgia for a while, I turned my gaze to my grandfather's old clock. All the furniture I brought, like the dresser and table, are functional, except for the old clock, which is the only exception. Having lost its purpose of telling time, it now merely stands in a corner of the room. Whenever I have some free time, I try various methods to repair it, but it remains motionless. Touching the old clock, memories of my childhood with my grandfather come flooding back. When I gaze at this clock and think about time, it allows me to reflect on how I've lived my life. Really, how so? Whether I've lived in a way that I can be proud of, whether I've spent my time meaningfully, and so on. I think the great thing about clocks is that they give you a chance to reevaluate yourself. I loved my grandfather, who would look at the clock with such a gentle gaze. Encouraged by these memories, I felt motivated to face tomorrow with renewed vigor. As I was psyching myself up, I heard the ringtone of my cell phone. It was an email from an employee at the company. The content mentioned company's year-end party. It seemed a slight change in location from last year. It seems the new location is near the company where Brandon works. I shook my head to clear away any unpleasant thoughts and quickly replied to the email. During that time, it seems I had received another email from someone in the sales department. As I read through the contents, I couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. What? A scandal has occurred. The email detailed a scandal involving a company we had considered a reliable partner. In such cases, the course of action for my company is clear. Naturally, continuing dealings with a company involved in a scandal could potentially harm us, so it should be stopped immediately. However, I found it hard to believe that such an incident had occurred. I called a person from the company involved. This company, a high-end watch retailer, had significant business deal with us. It was a company that had never caused any major issues before. I believe Emily was in charge. The person handling our business deal was a woman in her 50s named Emily, known for her seriousness and integrity. Even I, who have been covering for the sales department, have met her a few times. There was a time when an employee preparing coffee in our reception room fainted while Emily was there. Unfortunately, my leg had gone numb and I couldn't move immediately, but Emily kindly stepped in to take care of the situation in my stead. That's why I found it hard to believe that a company with someone like her could be involved in a scandal. According to her, a recent recruit had embezzled company funds and passed them to some nefarious group. Usually, their hiring process is rigorous, but this individual was hired by a temporary staff member, allowing someone with dubious background to join the company. My company is currently experiencing a similar situation with needing replacements, so I couldn't fault them for this. Afterwards, Emily and I had a long talk before ending the call. Looking back, it's ironic that this incident would later lead to getting back at Brandon, showing how unpredictable fate can be. Several weeks had passed. The day of the year-end party had arrived, so I was inside a pub. Sitting at a corner table, I had just finished checking the attendance list. An hour had passed since the start, and the employees, now under the influence of alcohol, were making merry. Due to prior engagements or feeling unwell, a few had left early, slightly reducing the number from the start. Remembering an employee who had collapsed near the pub last year due to excessive drinking made me worried. Fortunately, there were no serious issues or thefts, but it was a chilling moment. It might be wise to check the vicinity to ensure nothing similar happened. I informed a nearby secretary that I would step outside. Then, the secretary quickly brought me a towel. It's a bit unpleasant, but it's because there's a chance an employee who has collapsed on the street might vomit when helped up. Last year, dealing with such a situation was troublesome. However, the towel got slightly dirty, perhaps from touching something on the way. Noticing this, the secretary offered to bring another, but I declined. This is fine. It's just a small stain on the corner, and for someone who can't manage their drinking to the point of passing out on the street, this towel should suffice. While I wouldn't go as far as firing someone for such behavior, I plan to discipline any employee found in such a state. As I left the pub, watched by the secretary, I reflected on the past weeks in the cool night air. With new hires settling in, the atmosphere within the company was stabilizing. The absence of the need to multitask across departments meant fewer chances for major issues to arise. I was enjoying the rare opportunity to unwind at the year-end party when I encountered an unwelcome individual. Standing before me was the person I had reunited with in the reception room weeks ago. "Hey, Alex, what are you doing here?" Brandon had emerged from a nearby pub. Perhaps his company was also having a year-end party. I felt like holding my head in frustration at this coincidence. I wanted to ignore him and pass by, but it seemed he wouldn't allow that. "Speaking of which, your company holds its year-end party around this time, right? We do the same." "Is that so? Why don't you head back inside, then?" "Don't be like that. I just saw one of your employees passed out against a fence nearby." I wanted to end the conversation quickly and leave, but his words caught my attention. Is that really true? Jara, of course. Aren't you going to look for them? I stared at Brandon's smirking face, reeking of alcohol. It sounded utterly dubious, but I couldn't just ignore it. All right, thanks for letting me know. No problem. We used to work at the same company, after all. Reminding myself that I was doing this to ensure my employees' safety, I decided to search the area. After meticulously checking the surroundings for about 10 minutes, I found no sign of anyone resembling our staff. I hoped the inebriated employee had sobered up enough to make it home, but the thought of them being involved in some incident made me anxious. Reluctantly, as I didn't want to intrude on their private lives, I considered calling those who had already left to check on them. That's when Brandon approached me again. Holding a beer mug, he staggered towards me, noticeably more intoxicated than before. Before I knew it, I found myself back in front of the pub where Brandon had been. Brandon, staggering towards me, pointed and laughed. "Huh, you actually took it seriously. That was obviously a lie." It seemed I had been deceived. I could feel my fists trembling with a surge of anger. "Cut the jokes, I'm seriously angry now." "You're already angry, aren't you? Serves you right. And why are you holding a dirty towel? Couldn't you find anything cleaner? You really are poor." Huh? No matter how infuriated I was, I knew I shouldn't resort to violence. As I looked down, trying to contain my anger, something cold was poured over my head. The golden liquid was the beer that Brandon had been holding moments ago. Serves you right. Then, Brandon dragged me into a nearby pub. Dragged with great force, I fell into the pub. Looking up, I saw the place was filled with middle-aged men in suits, their faces flushed as they made a loud ruckus. Brandon began talking to them in a friendly manner. "Hey, bring some beer over here. This guy is too arrogant. He even had the nerve to fire me from my old job." These people were likely from the company where Brandon worked. Responding to Brandon's call, the men inside the pub started to gather around. With smirks on their faces, they tilted their beer mugs in their hands. The liquid inside was poured over me all at once. Drenched in beer one after another, I stood up, sympathizing with the bewildered pub owner. Brandon and his group were unlikely to bother with cleaning up the mess on the floor. After apologizing to the pub owner, I turned my back on Brandon and his group without giving them another glance. If I saw their disgraceful behavior any longer, I might not be able to hold back from striking. This is to freshen up your poor-looking self. However, just before leaving the pub, I heard a taunting voice and reached my breaking point. I turned to Brandon with a final remark. "Then, the deal for $200 million is off, effective immediately." What? It seemed Brandon was asking for his own ruin, so I decided to push him into the depths of despair. Standing with an empty beer mug, Brandon let out a foolish sound. Faced with his inability to grasp the severity of the situation, I elaborated. "Exactly what I said. The deal is off." "What are you talking about? My company doesn't have such a deal with yours." "Is that so? What about your wife's company?" "No way." A few weeks ago, after checking the year-end party email, I had confirmed that it was from Brandon's wife. During that call to Emily, I had learned about the scandal caused by one of her subordinates. Therefore, she asked me to cancel the $200 million business deal to avoid causing any trouble for us. Despite her husband's behavior, she seemed to be a sincere and good person. Business requires constantly considering benefits, but since it's conducted by humans, it's impossible to completely detach emotions. Torn about the situation, I felt it would be regrettable to lose my connection with her, so I said to Emily on the other end of the phone, "Since you weren't the one who caused the scandal, once the commotion settles down, we'll look for the right time to resume our business deal." While I had to maintain my company's dignity and cut and tacked immediately, I promised to restart the dealings once things cooled down. but the man before me was unaware of such a conversation. Ending my recollection, I called Emily right there to explain the current situation in a low voice. I also asked her to confront her husband with the reality of the situation. I turned my cell phone speaker towards Brandon. "Darling, President Johnson is right. I was going to tell you later, but for a while, my company won't be able to deal with anyone, so it looks like we'll be living a poor life for a bit. I'm sorry." Hearing this, Brandon spent a few seconds in a daze before his face turned pale. "No, this can't be. You're joking, right? You're not trying to trick me, are you? How could I joke about something like this? Is this for real?" Realizing the gravity of the situation, Brandon trembled and fell to his knees. And he began apologizing to me repeatedly. "Please, don't cancel the dealings with my wife's company. We won't be able to live." Despite his desperate pleas, none of his words resonated with me. "This is serious. Please, we used to work at the same company, remember? He didn't apologize for what he did to my company. He only thought about himself. There was no helping hand for such a person. I might catch a cold, so I'll be heading back." So, without saying a word he wanted to hear, I decided to leave the scene. Upon returning to the year-end party venue, my employees greeted me with shocked expressions. "President Johnson, what happened to you?" The employees, wondering if it had rained, looked out the window in confusion. Among them, a secretary who came close might have realized what happened by the smell of beer. After bringing another towel, she started arranging a taxi for me. Later, I had someone buy me new clothes, and I changed in the restroom, but I still felt sticky. In such a state, I had no choice but to head home early. As I waited outside for the taxi, Brandon ran up to me, out of breath. "Good, you're still here. Please, Alex, President Johnson, don't cancel the dealings with my wife's company. I apologize for splashing beer on you." Brandon repeated his apologies in front of me. Despite his efforts, my mind was made up. Did he think that by pleading earnestly, my feelings would change? Without looking me in the eyes, Brandon kept repeating the same words. Then, hearing his voice, my employees came outside. "Why is Brandon here? And you mentioned beer earlier. Don't tell me you're the one who splashed it on President Johnson." They glared at Brandon with disdain. This could turn the year-end party into chaos. Not wanting to involve the employees who were having a good time, I tried to return inside, but Brandon grabbed my clothes from behind. "Don't leave me. Are you planning to abandon me?" As I pondered what to do, the employees scolded him. "Enough is enough. Do you have any idea how much trouble your actions have caused our company? That's right. Don't cause us any more trouble. We didn't even want to see your face again. Just disappear from our sight now." Brandon, who seemed shocked to be confronted with such words, trembled. Each time he faced the employee's verbal onslaught, he seemed about to say something but ended up only trembling his lips without uttering a word. Eventually, as if resigning to his fate, his shoulders slumped and he wandered off unsteadily. After he was out of sight, a wave of exhaustion hit me. Given his condition, it seemed unlikely he would show up in front of us again. Then, I took a taxi home. Perhaps influenced by my parting words to enjoy the rest of the party on my behalf, it seems the year-end party continued without further issues. Upon receiving photos from my secretary of the employees enjoying themselves, I checked the images and breathed a sigh of relief. As I was about to take a bath, dragging my tired body, the sound of an incoming email notification from my cell phone echoed again. It was a message informing me that Brandon had returned home to Emily. Putting off my bath, I called Emily. "Hello, do you have a moment? My husband just got home and explained everything to me. It seems he was quite rude to you and your company." It appeared she was eager to apologize for her husband's actions. Imagining her sincere face, the unpleasant feelings I had harbored earlier began to dissipate. "It's okay. I'm not too bothered by it." but I'm sorry if he disrupted your enjoyable year-end party. Everyone seems to be having a good time still. Thank you for your concern. I had no intention of blaming Emily. I guess our company is completely disliked by hers now. Not at all. Both I and my team know you're not at fault. Please don't say such things. Thank you. Even if it's just a white lie, it makes me feel a bit better. It wasn't a lie, but she might find it hard to believe. With her heartfelt apologies, I couldn't think poorly of her. By the way, I've been curious about something. Feeling it was cruel to make her apologize any further, I diverted the conversation by asking something I had been curious about for a while. I inquired about the reason why the self-centered Brandon and Emily, with such contrasting personalities, ended up getting married and becoming a couple. I wondered why two people with completely different characters decided to have a wedding ceremony. Oh, that. Actually, we didn't decide on a marriage ourselves. Emily explained awkwardly. It was decided by our parents. Their marriage was arranged without considering their own wills. Their parents were close friends and thought their children would be compatible. Thus, they arranged the marriage, ignoring Emily and Brandon's own desires. Those are terrible parents. I was astounded by her story. But it explained why someone as selfish as Brandon could exist. Emily seemed determined to divorce him. She sounded relieved over the phone. Once I divorce, I plan to start over and rebuild the company. When we're able to do business again, may I reach out to you? Yes, of course. I look forward to the day we can work with your company again. Though she may face many challenges ahead, I'm sure she'll be all right. No matter how daunting the obstacles, she's strong enough to overcome them. Later, it seemed Emily had cut ties with Brandon. After the divorce, he reportedly moved to a rundown apartment. But that wasn't the end of his troubles. The incident that night had been witnessed by a company executive, it seems, making Brandon feel unwelcome at work. I hear through the grapevine that the other employees who doused me with alcohol are experiencing similar discomfort. Some were demoted or punished. Brandon was demoted to an ordinary employee. Eventually, he couldn't bear the hostile work environment. He resigned from the company and became reclusive in his apartment. Meanwhile, as the company continues to grow, we've been facing busier days, but everything is moving along smoothly. Our products are selling well, and the new employees are all hardworking and contribute significantly. Without a troublemaker like Brandon, the atmosphere within the company is always positive. By the time a year had passed, Emily's company had recovered from the scandal's damage, and we were able to resume transactions with them. It was a joy to see her face again when I attended a business meeting with the sales department. It's been a while. Just like I said before, I've come to do business with your company again. I'm really glad you've managed to recover. Gradually, from that reunion, we began to talk more and developed a friendship, which was a positive outcome. As the number of employees increased, I gradually found myself with more free time. I took this opportunity to refine my clock repair skills and finally managed to repair my grandfather's clock. It was a challenging task that took several days, but I managed to fix the old clock. Filled with a sense of accomplishment, I thought of my late grandfather and spoke to the clock. I've finally got the clock working again, Grandpa. I wonder if you're watching over me from heaven. I hope the sound of this clock can reach you there. The ticking of the clock, moving for the first time in decades, sounded like a blessing for the new days ahead. I'm not a chief anymore. I'm a director now and will soon be promoted to vice president. After dropping out of middle school, I landed my first job at a company where my boss constantly looked down on me and eventually fired me. Today is my wedding anniversary with my wife, yet it turned out to be the worst possible reunion. After getting fired, I immediately found another job, but it seems like my condescending former boss still thinks I'm unemployed. If you really insist, I might consider rehiring you at our company. I'll be the executive vice president soon, and I can get you back in. But in return, you must swear loyalty to me. If you promise to do that, I'll give you another chance." Before I could respond, my wife spoke up to my ex-boss, who had made such a ridiculous statement. "Well then, it's about time we take you and your company down." She said this with a sly smile. "My name is Alex. Now working as a systems engineer. I live happily with my wife, Sarah, and we are about to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. My parents were well off, with my father being an attorney and my mother a homemaker. The reason I use a past tense is that there's a significant event in my past that marks a before and after in my life. This is because when I was in my first year of high school, my family was involved in a car accident, and I was the only one who survived. After the accident, I woke up in a hospital bed only to learn that both of my parents had passed away. Losing my parents all at once, I couldn't accept the reality and secluded myself in my room, losing any motivation to attend school, leading to my dropping out. Unable to maintain the house we had lived in for so long, I eventually had to let it go. Back then, I was unable to do anything and just spent my days in a daze. During such times, Jack, an attorney who was a friend of my father and also Sarah's dad, provided me with a lot of support. Your father was my dearest friend and a great man. Alex, you are very important to me too. Let me help you so you don't face any disadvantages, he said, taking care of various procedures on my behalf. Jack had a daughter, and she was Sarah. Alex, if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know, she said. She looked after me when I was in a state of apathy, taking care of me in various ways. Although Sarah and I used to play together as children because our fathers were friends, we gradually lost touch as we got older due to the natural distance that develops between boys and girls. Reuniting after about 10 years, I barely recognized her and embarrassingly muttered, "Who is this?" But her familiar expressions and smile reassured me, reminding me of the old times. Thanks to the support from Sarah and her family, I was eventually able to recover and start a new life. I am forever grateful to them. To begin my new life, I started looking for a job. Jack suggested, "Why not return to high school? I can cover the tuition if necessary. There are scholarships available, and there's also the money your parents left behind." However, I had no intention of going back to high school. I was thinking of getting a job for my future livelihood. The profession I aspired to be was an engineer. Although I had other aspirations, my current situation made them unattainable, so I had to give them up. Despite the challenges of job hunting with only a middle school diploma, I was filled with hope when I saw an advertisement on a job site for Belak Company, stating system engineer wanted, beginners welcome, seniors will kindly teach you. It's a homely workplace. Encouraged by these words, I applied to the company. I applied and was thrilled to be hired. But it turned out to be a company with terrible working conditions. Upon joining the company, I was immediately handed a book as thick as a dictionary and told, "Everything about the job is written in this manual, so look through it and learn. Don't leave until you understand it." I'll never forget that moment. The seniors were far from kind, expecting me to arrive an hour early, clean their desks, serve coffee, and work unpaid overtime. Although I read the thick manual, I couldn't grasp everything from it alone. When I asked for clarification, I was yelled at. "I told you everything is in the manual." Seniors and supervisors blamed everything on my being a middle school graduate, lashing out at me for reasons I couldn't understand, honestly leaving me with a stomachache every day. I was hardly given any real work as a systems engineer and was stuck doing menial tasks instead. My direct supervisor, Linda, was the worst of all. From day one, she mockingly called me middle school grad and piled on unreasonable demands. I heard Linda graduated from a state university, She relentlessly dumped a seemingly endless amount of work on me. And she would do this just 5 minutes before the end of my shift. Once, I was unexpectedly given an all-nighter task with the instruction, "I need this for the first meeting tomorrow morning, so have it done by 5 a.m." Of course, this was unpaid overtime. Once, I was told, "I want coffee now, make it." So despite being in the middle of work, I hurriedly made and brought the coffee to her. However, it was deemed terrible and I was ordered to remake it multiple times. In the end, I was scolded for taking too much time and the coffee was splashed right in my face. It wasn't hot, so I managed to avoid getting seriously burned, but if it had been, I would have been in serious trouble. I was also forced to attend a drinking party by Linda, despite gently refusing and mentioning, "I'm a minor," so I was told, the minor middle school grad can just stay in the corner, and indeed, I was only allowed to drink water in the corner. When I tried to leave, I was scolded, "Don't you dare leave on your own, middle school grad," and they made sure to collect a party fee from me. Since then, I've been terrified of attending drinking parties. However, in the same department, there was a saving grace for me, a guy named James. James joined the company after graduating from high school, and he too was referred to by Linda as high school grad. There was a time when Linda dumped more work on us, and James helped me out. But when Linda saw this, she said, "It's a waste of time for one failure to help another. If you have so much free time, I'll give you more work." And then James ended up with even more work than before. It was clear harassment. After that, James couldn't help me openly much, but he did help me a lot when the boss or Linda wasn't around. He even did some of my work and backed me up a lot. James was the only saving grace for me in that place. Then one day, James and I were called by Linda, who handed us some documents and said, "You two need to complete all this work. The deadlines are written on each cover. You must adhere to them strictly. You know what will happen if you don't meet them, right?" The amount of work we were assigned was enormous, seemingly impossible. At first glance, there were about 30 tasks. And the deadline is the day after tomorrow. Flipping through the documents, I realized more than half of them were due tomorrow. It's 6 p.m. now. Starting this late, completing more than half by tomorrow morning is impossible. There's no way we can finish this. This is unreasonable. There's no way we can. Both James and I tried to protest to Linda, but she just said, "It's not about whether you can't, you have to do it. If you don't finish, you're fired. Good luck, you useless buddies." With that, Linda left. This is impossible. James and I were crushed by despair, with no hope of anyone else helping us. I couldn't imagine other colleagues offering their help. Having hardly done any real work as a systems engineer before, being suddenly tasked with this job was overwhelming. "Well, let's just do what we can," James said, picking up the stack of documents. "Yeah, let's give it our best shot." With a forced smile, we decided to start with the tasks to next morning. I tried my best to understand the thick manual I received on my first day while working on the tasks. We worked desperately, continuing even after everyone else had left, and before we knew it, morning came. The sunlight shining through the windows was blinding. "So, did you manage to complete them?" Linda asked us first thing in the morning. We couldn't finish everything. It was an expected outcome. James and I couldn't complete all the work. I'd like to know if anyone could manage that amount of work in one night. Surely, even Linda, who assigned it, would find it impossible. "Well then, you'll have to take responsibility. You're both fired as of today." "What? Isn't it obvious? You couldn't do your job properly. We have no need for such incompetence, especially from a high school and middle school grad. We don't need low-educated people here," she said. "Wait a minute. That amount was impossible. Linda, you knew that, right?" Who do you think you're talking to? It's your fault for not being able to do your job. But that's just. Despite our back and forth with Linda, we couldn't win against her, and we were indeed fired. With people like Manager Dean and Director Kimberly taking a hands-off approach, Linda's word was enough to get us fired in this company. After leaving the company with James, I couldn't help but break down and cry. I couldn't stop the tears from guilt. James, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. Alex, it's hard to understand you when you're crying like this, James said with a wry smile. It's all because of me. No, that was all Linda's doing. Well, it's done now. Leaving that terrible company might just be for the best. James offered me tissue as he smiled broadly, his grin seemingly deserving of a sound effect. Exhausted from the all-nighter, we talked about confronting President Thompson directly the next day at work, but ended up going home and sleeping soundly. However, that evening, I received a call from Mr. Thompson, the president, who simply said, "You're all fired after what you did. Don't expect any severance pay," before hanging up. After that, no matter how many times I called, I couldn't get through. I was probably blocked. Honestly, at that moment, I was beyond caring about that. So when James suggested, "Let's have a farewell party for us," and came over to my place the next day, I couldn't think about the future at all. As we ate and talked, James mentioned, "By the way, Alex, I've been thinking about starting my own company. Would you help me out? Be my first employee?" He put his arm around my shoulder as he said this. James was already looking towards the future. Impressive. Seeing him like that made me realize I couldn't keep moping around. "Yes, please let me know if there's anything I can do." I figured I had nothing left to lose, so why not give it my all working for James? And James really did start his own company. We continued as systems engineers, the same as our previous job. Despite numerous competitors, we managed to find work and gradually increase our clientele. Now we have many clients and are busy working. And Sarah, who had always been there for me during the hard times after my parents' accident and at work, became my girlfriend a while back. It's a fond memory when she said, "I'll support you, Alex," and we laughed because it's usually the other way around. Since James' company was doing well, I proposed to Sarah. She accepted, and we were able to get married. I feel incredibly happy now, a stark contrast to my lowest moments. Today is our first wedding anniversary. To celebrate, we booked a famous Japanese restaurant in the area. The highlight of this restaurant is the large teppan grill in front of the counter seats where the chef cooks the ingredients. The chef's performance while cooking is popular, making it a sought-after reservation. We had to book half a year in advance. Sarah was also saying, "I'm really looking forward to it," so I was truly relieved that we were able to get a reservation. Then, Sarah and I went to the restaurant at our reservation time and were led to prime seats right in the middle of the counter. "Wow, these are the best seats," Sarah said with a smile, and I agreed, "Yeah, we're lucky." We ordered wine and toasted. Right in front of us, Chef Michael was already grilling some Wagyu beef, and the aroma was enticing. As we sipped on wine and savored the food, enjoying a pleasant conversation, a voice from behind suddenly asked, "Hey, aren't you the middle school grad guy?" I instinctively turned around, and there was Linda. Honestly, my first thought was, I should have known. She was the only one who ever called me a middle school grad. "Linda." "Knew it. What are you doing here?" Linda approached as she spoke. As usual, just having Linda in front of me made my body tense up momentarily. It might as well be considered a reflex. "How have you been, Linda?" "Me. I'm here for a business dinner. I just happened to see a familiar face on my way back from the restroom." Then, Linda's expression turned condescending, and she smirked. As always, the middle school grad looks so gloomy. I'll just ignore her. She'll give up eventually. That's what I decided and chose to ignore her. I could see Michael grilling abalone now. It looked delicious too. By the way, after you left our company, were you able to find a job anywhere? Though, as a middle school grad, I suppose you hardly have any income, she taunted. Here's your abalone. Please enjoy, the chef interrupted. This looks delicious. Let's eat, Sarah. Yes, let's eat. Ignoring Linda, Sarah and I enjoyed abalone. Wow, it's so chewy. Seemingly irked by our disregard, Linda continued her provocations. Despite being a middle school grad, you can afford to dine at such a high-end place. Is this lady your wife? At that remark, Sarah glanced at Linda. Are you being supported by your wife? How does that make you feel as a man? Well, I guess it can be helped since you're a middle school grad. Linda laughed mockingly. Sarah, unable to hold back, started to stand up, saying, "Excuse me, what have you been saying all this time?" But I stopped her. Sarah, let's just ignore her. Mistaking our silence for defeat, Linda jeered, can't come back with a response. How pitiful. Linda, I just don't want to stoop to your level. I've always thought that despite your education, you lack common sense, I retorted deliberately. What? Linda exploded in anger. Who do you think you are, talking back to me like that, you middle school grad? People like you shouldn't even be in places like this. You ruin the atmosphere. Oh, she's really polished her insults, I thought. Hey Michael, kick these guys out right now. I'm the one saying it. Do it quickly. Suddenly put on the spot, Michael stopped grilling the lobster and looked bewildered, saying, Me. I think that's a natural reaction. Michael, please continue with the lobster, I requested. Okay. He replied and resumed his cooking. The aroma of lobster filled the air. I am the next vice president of BLAC. You should listen to me. Linda raised her voice even more. BLAC was the company I used to work for. Linda, the next vice president. I was genuinely surprised and asked her to clarify. Yes, I'm not just a chief anymore. I'm a director, and thanks to you and James, I'm going to be vice president, she boasted. Thanks to me and James. Then she revealed a shocking truth. The reason James and I were fired wasn't just because of the delay in our work that day, but because Linda had framed us for misconduct, claiming we were the ones involved. I altered some numbers in the data you guys worked on and reported, Chris, they are tampering with the data. They praised me for noticing. It was like I blew the whistle. Thanks to that, my reputation improved, and I climbed the corporate ladder, she bragged. That's not something to brag about. I was appalled. It was practically a confession. She admitted to wrongdoing and pinning the blame on us. If you insist, I might rehire you at our company. Now that I'm going to be vice president, I could arrange for your reemployment. Linda suddenly offered, stunned. All I could manage was a baffled, In return, work tirelessly under me and swear your loyalty. If you promise that, I'll hire you again, Linda said, laughing haughtily. I was about to retort, I'd have to refuse that, but in that moment, Sarah, who should have been next to me, was already standing in front of me. Linda, you're going to be the next vice president. That's great. Now we can finally take down you and your company. Sarah said this with a bright smile. What? Take me down? My company? Yes, I apologize for not introducing myself earlier, Sarah said, handing Linda a business card from her case, still looking puzzled. The business card should read Attorney Sarah Parker. An attorney? Yes, I'm Sarah Parker, an attorney specializing in labor-related issues, such as unpaid wages, illegal working hours, and harassment from superiors, to name a few. Really? Linda's complexion visibly worsened as she spoke. Perhaps she was aware of the terrible things she had done to us. Actually, I've been consulted by an employee from your company as well, Sarah continued. What? They mentioned being verbally abused by a supervisor named Linda. We're currently considering legal action. Who would dare to consult about that? Linda blurted out in panic. I can't disclose that, it's confidential information. Kind of like internal whistleblowing, isn't it? Sarah replied, mimicking Linda's earlier tone. Sarah then took out a small voice recorder from her pocket. By the way, I've recorded our entire conversation. I'm not sure if that will serve as evidence, but you did admit to misconduct and pushing Alex and James out of their jobs. I knew Sarah always carried a voice recorder as part of her job, but I never imagined it would come in handy like this. Well, Linda was at a loss for words, her earlier bravado gone. We were considering legal action, as I mentioned earlier, but actually, the documents have already been sent. By now, they should be reaching President Thompson of the company. I wonder if he's turning blue in the face, Sarah said cheerfully. The moment Sarah cheerfully said that, a ringtone blared from Linda's pocket. In a panic, Linda pulled out her cell phone, and her face turned even paler upon seeing the caller ID. Likely Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, are you not going to answer that? Could it be that the documents actually arrived? Teased by Sarah, Linda hesitantly tapped on her cell phone screen. Linda, where are you? Get back to the office now. President Thompson's angry voice was audible to all of us. After that, Linda rushed off somewhere, and Sarah and I resumed our seats. Sorry for the disturbance, Michael, I apologized. No worries, it's been quite an ordeal for you. Shall I continue with the next dish? Michael offered with a friendly smile. We responded with yes please. I couldn't help but wonder about Linda, who claimed to be at the restaurant for a business dinner. I hope she was all right, although it hardly mattered in the grand scheme of things. When I later told James, the president of our current company, about the incident, he laughed. So you finally got back at Linda. I also informed him about Linda's false accusations against us. Seriously, James was astonished. Yes, Sarah recorded her confession, so you can listen to it later, I suggested. That woman, how dare she? James muttered, his eyes filled with anger. Then, James said, Alex, I've been thinking about something. Are you in? That look on his face reminded me of when he first proposed starting a business together. I wondered what he had in mind this time. I'll follow you, James, I responded. James's plan was to buy shares in the company we used to work for and attend the shareholders' meeting to demand the removal of President Thompson and his team. If we explain Linda's misdeeds to the shareholders, don't you think they'll agree to demand Thompson's removal? James speculated. There's a possibility, especially since Linda, who's about to become vice president, has already been reported in legal documents, I agreed. Wasting no time, James and I purchased shares and successfully made contact with the shareholders. We recounted all the things Linda had done to us. We also had plenty to say about Kimberly and Mr. Thompson, who were considering promoting such a person to executive vice president while turning a blind eye to her actions. The fact that an attorney was already involved added credibility to our claims. Many shareholders were appalled by the company's unethical practices. An emergency shareholders meeting was called, resulting in the dismissal of President Thompson and his executives. Our company, led by James as the president, then acquired the company to protect the remaining employees. Linda was ousted and lost her job as a result. After being fired, Linda suddenly showed up at our company one day and said, I was just stressed out working for such a toxic company. That's all it was, just taking it out a little on you juniors, right? You'll forgive me, won't you? I could even consider working at your place, James, and for some reason, she had the audacity to say this from a position of superiority, clinging to James for a chance. But James dismissed her. Linda, you're just reaping what you sowed, and promptly sent her away. Unable to find employment elsewhere due to her personality, Linda ended up working at a nightclub, where she reportedly wasn't very successful. Now, I hear she's struggling even to eat, and there are rumors she's working at a construction site. It's understandable that working in such a terrible company would lead to stress. I worked in that environment myself, so I know. But no matter how tough it was, taking it out on others is wrong. What Linda did to us was definitely harmful. I hope someday she realizes that. Sarah, thank you so much, I said to her, grateful that the issue with Linda and the company was finally settled. I always seem to be relying on you, Sarah. It makes me feel a bit pathetic, I said, chuckling. Not at all. You're not pathetic, Sarah reassured me with a smile. It's because of you that I am who I am today. Because of me. You might not remember this, but Sarah then shared a story from when we were in elementary school. Sarah had been harassed by her classmates when she was in elementary school. The harassment began over something trivial. Her classmates found out her father was an attorney. Sarah's family must be rich. That's why she acts so high and mighty. Somehow, such talk spread around the class, and attitude towards Sarah worsened. But you were always different, treating me the same as ever. In the end, even though he was in a different class, you said, "Don't you dare treat Sarah like that. My dad's an attorney too. If you're going to harass her, then harass me too." Yeah, I remember that. Even though it was a different class, I barged into the room and got scolded. At that time, Sarah was so obviously downcast, I just had to pry and listen. Hearing her say everyone assumed she was rich just because her dad was an attorney, I remember immediately going to Sarah's class. The day after you stood up for me, the bullying started to decrease, and eventually, it stopped altogether. Because of you, I wanted to become someone who could stand up to wrongdoing, which led me to pursue law, Sarah said, blushing. I felt embarrassed too, hearing her say that. Maybe that's because of my dad, I suggested. Your dad? Yeah, he was also an attorney, right? He always stood firm against what was wrong. Maybe his influence rubbed off on me. My dad lived by the creed "Be fair, just, and uphold righteousness," and that motto was framed in his study. I guess I was full of a sense of justice because of my dad, I mused. I admired that about you, Alex. That's why I wanted to be there for you, especially after your parents' accident, Sarah shared. I didn't know that. I don't remember much from that time. But I clearly remember being supported by Sarah and Jack. But it really frustrated me to see Alex, who had finally got back on his feet, suffering in such a toxic company. I wanted to do something to help. When I was working at Black, Sarah, who was a college student at the time, continued, saying how helpless she felt not being able to do anything. Sarah's father, Jack, was very busy and, being a criminal defense attorney, wasn't always available for consultation. Besides, even if something had been said to me at the time, I don't think I would have had the capacity to deal with it. That's how on edge I was every day back then. One day, if you ever decided to take action against that company, I wanted to be strong enough to help. So I decided to become an attorney to gain the strength to fight. In the end, I feel like all my motivation comes from you. Sarah's unexpected words almost brought me to tears. I had no idea she thought so highly of me. It was completely unexpected. Sarah, thank you so much. In the end, I couldn't help but cry. Actually, I've always had this dream of becoming an attorney like my dad. If I had been living a normal life, I would have wanted to go to law school. Really, I had no idea. It was natural for her to be surprised, as this was something I had never shared with Sarah before. But after my parents' accident and dropping out of high school, that dream seemed unattainable. I've been so focused on working hard that I forgot I even had that dream, I reflected. Hearing Sarah's story reminded me that I once had such aspirations too. What do you want to do, Alex? It's not too late to chase your dream of becoming an attorney, Sarah encouraged. Maybe I could take the GED and go to university, but right now, I find my work as a systems engineer more appealing, I mused. After leaving that terrible company, James reintroduced me to the world of systems engineering, teaching me everything from scratch. At my previous company, I was supposed to be trained for work but ended up doing mostly basic tasks. So it was only after joining James' company that I truly got to build systems myself. And that's when I fully realized the thrill of creating systems. The immense satisfaction I felt when a system I designed worked exactly as intended was unforgettable. I'm sure James would support me if I decided to pursue law now, saying, "Go for it." He's that kind of a supportive person. But the truth is, I want to support James, who has always been there for me. Moreover, I take great pride in my work as a systems engineer. So, I'll carry on with your dream of being an attorney, Alex, and continue to make strides forward, Sarah said with a laugh. Jer, keep shining for both of us, I responded, laughing along. Our company, under James' leadership, has grown significantly since acquiring our former employer. We work every day with a motto, not to achieve results through overwork, but to work comfortably and enable each person to maximize their potential. Tom, who joined us from that company, was astonished by this philosophy, exclaiming, "We don't have to overdo it." Upon hearing that, James said, "I definitely don't want you to overdo it. Nobody would be happy with that," which brought me to tears. Apparently, he had been getting by on energy drinks every day. Indeed, Tom's dark circles were quite severe. Thanks to this philosophy, the work environment in our company is comfortable, and our performance is on the rise. It seems Tom's dark circles are even starting to fade. I'm determined to continue working hard to support James. I feel blessed by the people around me throughout my life. Sarah, James, my parents, and Jack, they've all been my support. Despite encountering someone like Linda, I've lived honestly without straying onto the wrong path. I believe that's why I'm not facing an end like Linda's. They say that others are a mirror reflecting oneself. I believe that when you do good things for others, good things will surely come back to you. Conversely, if you do bad things will return to you. I'm reminded once again of my desire to be sincere with everyone I encounter. You're useless and at the bottom of the barrel. You're fired today. It's better to use a newbie who graduated from a prestigious university than you. Mr. Sawyer was grinning smugly. I couldn't hold it in any longer after being told that. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. After saying my goodbyes, I left the workplace. This was the turning point that led to Mr. Sawyer's downfall and my step towards a new life. My name is Brian. I'm a regular office worker in my 40s. After graduating from a local university, I joined a local company and worked as a salesperson for a precision equipment parts manufacturer. Since I was a newbie, I worked hard and now I'm at the top in terms of performance. Work and family are going well, and I'm working hard with the support of my kind wife. Thanks to her, I was able to become a manager before any of my peers. The person who raised me to be this way was my boss, Mr. Foster. But Mr. Foster is already in his 60s. Hearing that he would retire this year, I went to say my final farewell. I'm very grateful for everything. It'll be lonely without you, Mr. Foster. From now on, Brian, you'll be leading the sales. Do your best. I'm rooting for you. Yes, I will do my best. Mr. Foster patted me on the shoulder and smiled as if to encourage me. A new manager will be coming soon, Brian. I'm sure you'll do well. You have a lot of trust from your subordinates. I'll do my best to meet expectations. Mr. Foster, please take it easy from now on. Thank you. It was quite sad to see Mr. Foster, who was like a father figure at the workplace, leave the company. But I vowed in my heart to lead my subordinates like Mr. Foster did. The new manager arrived the following week. He came from the headquarters, so he didn't know much about this region. But since he was an elite graduated from a prestigious university, we were expecting a great person. Mr. Sawyer, nice to meet you. I'm Brian, a manager here. I look forward to working with you. Which university did you graduate from, Brian? I graduated from Towson University here. Hearing my answer, Mr. Sawyer smirked. Never heard of it. So you were saying you're a graduate of some unknown third-rate university. Well, do your best, I guess. I was internally frustrated by Mr. Sawyer's condescending attitude. But I love my current job, so I decided not to worry too much about it. I was concerned about the arrival of a manager with strong quirks, but I thought it would be fine as long as I continued working as usual. However, my expectation was quickly betrayed. Mr. Sawyer, not familiar with this region, began to drastically change our dealings with existing clients, calling them cozy relationships. Moreover, sticking to this is how we did it at the headquarters. He assigned us ridiculous tasks with his unique theories. Mr. Sawyer, the previous method was much easier for that task. Don't be cheeky. Don't go against me. I am the department head. I didn't mean to oppose you. I thought I was giving helpful advice, but it seemed to have only angered Mr. Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer glared at me with sharp eyes. Are you trying to deceive me because I'm not familiar with this region? I wasn't thinking that at all. But Mr. Sawyer, your method is inefficient. How dare you speak to your superior in that tone? This is why people from third-rate universities, my colleagues who were listening to our exchange, looked panicked. Mr. Sawyer was always like this, not just with me but also making it hard for the subordinates. Whenever we expressed our opinions, Mr. Sawyer would immediately say, "This is an order from the manager. Don't oppose me as a subordinate." Due to Mr. Sawyer's refusal to listen to anyone, the atmosphere at the company turned sour. One day, when I went out for drinks with my subordinates, they said, "Brian, isn't Mr. Sawyer getting out of hand? He's changing our ways on his own, and he doesn't listen to our opinions about work. Indeed, it's been a bit hard to work. Our methods are definitely more efficient and easier, and the unnecessary overtime is getting unbearable." Listening to my subordinates' complaints, all I could do was give a wry smile. I've mentioned it a few times myself, but he doesn't listen at all. That's the point. Mr. Sawyer is particularly harsh towards you, Brian. He always brings up academic backgrounds. Anyone can see that you're good at your job if they work with you for a bit. All I could do was try to encourage them, and I patted my subordinate on the shoulder. Well, maybe Mr. Sawyer will understand in time. Let's keep up the good work until then. Yes, I like this job, but recently, I've started dreading coming to the office. Well, let's keep the sales going among us. Though I said this to my subordinates, the atmosphere in the sales department had indeed been bad recently. I wanted to do something about it, but I couldn't go against Mr. Sawyer, and he probably wouldn't listen to me anyway. Honestly, I was also feeling stressed by Mr. Sawyer's attitude. I was working hard, but Mr. Sawyer judged me solely on my academic background, leaving me wondering what to do. A few months passed in this manner when one day, I inadvertently stepped in as I saw Mr. Sawyer berating a subcontractor more harshly than usual. Mr. Sawyer, that might be a bit too harsh, don't you think? What is this third-rate university incompetent babbling about? University backgrounds are irrelevant now. The subcontractor is an important partner to our company. It's troubling if they are treated too harshly. Shut up. What right does someone from the bottom like you have to act so high and mighty? Mr. Sawyer glared at me hatefully and sneered unpleasantly. That's right. We don't need someone like you. An incompetent bottom dweller like you is fired. It's better to use a new hire who graduated from a prestigious university. I thought I had gotten used to Mr. Sawyer's nonsensical remarks, but his words this time made no sense to me. What do you mean? Haven't you heard? The incompetent have even incompetent ears. There's a new person joining the sales department tomorrow. He's an elite, graduated from a prestigious university. Ah, is that so? It's clear that someone from a prestigious university is more competent. I've decided to make the newcomer the manager instead of you, starting tomorrow. I was utterly shocked by Mr. Sawyer's statement. I looked at Mr. Sawyer doubtfully, wondering if he was serious, but he was grinning smugly. It would be tough for the newcomer to suddenly become a manager. I've decided. I'll speak to the HR department as the department head. By tomorrow, you'll probably be fired. It'll be refreshing to be rid of an incompetent, bottom-dweller employee. I couldn't take it anymore after being told that. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. After saying my goodbyes, I left the workplace. A few subordinates chased after me trying to hold me back, but I only responded with, "I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I leave the rest to you," and then I completely left the company. My subordinates might have thought of me as cold for leaving so abruptly. But I decided that nothing good would come from Mr. Sawyer and me as the manager, continuing to clash. Moreover, the rumors about the newcomer from a prestigious university being truly competent had reached me. If such an outstanding person was coming to support the sales department, I decided to leave the company with my regrets in check. Upon leaving the company, I immediately called my father. "Hello, Dad. I got fired from the company." "Oh, is that so? You've worked hard until now." Since Mr. Sawyer's arrival, I have been telling my father that I might quit my job. When I called to tell him, surprisingly, my father immediately told me to come to his company. So, right after resigning, I headed to the company run by my father. When I say my father's company, it's actually now my brother who has taken over as president, and my father has stepped down to the chairman position. Initially, after my graduation, I was suggested to work in sales at my father's company, but wanting to experience the rough waves of society first, I chose to work at a local company for some social experience. My father, who had listened to my whims, offered to re-employ me at his company. In fact, I had been approached a little while ago about joining my father's company. Though I had always talked about work with enthusiasm, my expression had darkened and I had become reticent in the past few months, which my father had completely seen through. "Hey, something must have changed at your workplace recently." "How did you know?" "I can tell just by looking at you. You used to go to your job as if you were kicking up the company, but now you don't talk about it at all." Was it that obvious? Actually, the new manager who arrived is an unbelievable person. While glossing over the specifics of the work, I shared what Mr. Sawyer had said, and my father was even angrier than I was. "You should quit a company like that any time. Our company always has a place for you." "It's not that simple. I have subordinates who look up to me, but I appreciate the offer. Could you give me some time to think about it?" Having had that conversation before, it's probably why my father immediately said he would re-employ me. In the end, the same day I left the company, I went to my family's company and was immediately placed in sales. Just as my father had said. My brother offered me a managerial position, but I felt it was too much to ask for. I'm a newcomer to this company, so I'll join as a regular employee. In fact, my father's company is a major precision equipment manufacturer. That is, it was a major client of the company where I used to work. As a salesperson who used to work for a parts factory that was a supplier, I vowed to work for my father's company, making the most of my knowledge. I thought about how I could repay my father and brother for everything they had done for me. The next day, I immediately went on a round of greetings to suppliers and clients with my new boss, Ryan. Among them was, of course, the company I had worked for until the day before. Knowing the situation, Ryan offered to skip it, considering my feelings. But I insisted it was fine and headed straight to my former company. As expected, my subordinates were quite surprised to see me as a new contact person from the client side. A subordinate who was close to me misunderstood and tearfully said, "Brian, you've come back, that's great." However, all I could respond was, "Sorry, but from today, I'm an employee of the client company." This subordinate was disappointed, hoping I would come back, but then Mr. Sawyer appeared. Mr. Sawyer, with his usual unpleasant look, glanced at me, and without even checking the name of the company I had re-employed at, he disparaged, "A bottom feeder like you could only get a job at some low-level company." Really, what kind of person is he? As I was pondering this, a man approached. "Mr. Sawyer, such disrespect towards a client is questionable." It's fine. This guy is, you know, James, I told you about the incompetent bottom feeder I fired yesterday." The man referred to as James looked worriedly at Mr. Sawyer, frowning. "I think that's irrelevant now. Whatever his status was until yesterday, he's here as a client today." "Maybe so, but we don't need to deal with a company that employs such incompetence. Send him away quickly." Mr. Sawyer. It seemed that James was the new manager who had taken over my position. The elite from prestigious university that Mr. Sawyer had mentioned. Unlike Mr. Sawyer, this person appeared polite and certainly intelligent. Hearing this exchange, I felt relieved, but Ryan, appalled, spoke up. "We came here today to introduce Brian, the new contact person, but isn't this disrespectful?" I know him, so no need for introductions. Besides, we won't be dealing with your company." "In that case, shall we consider our business dealings with your company terminated? I don't want to associate with a company that hires incompetence." After stating this, Mr. Sawyer waved me off rudely. "Come on, get out. I have no intention of dealing with someone like you." Are you sure about terminating our dealings? Can't you hear? Incompetents are useless all around. Get out quickly, or I'll call security." With that, there was nothing more to do. Ryan and I returned and reported the incident to my brother, the president, and my father, the chairman. My father, with a troubled expression, said, "We've had a long relationship with that company, but maybe it's time to end it," and started writing something. The rest of the story was relayed to me later by a subordinate I was close to. A few days later, President Watson personally summoned Mr. Sawyer. "Mr. Sawyer, you've done something unthinkable." "I have no idea what you're talking about." Mr. Sawyer, looking troubled, was quietly interrogated by President Watson. "You turned away a new contact person who came to greet us the other day, didn't you?" "Oh yes, that guy. But there's no need to worry about it. That person had just left the company and was truly incompetent at his job. I didn't ask for that. Turning away a contact person is not the way to treat a client. But it's fine not to deal with a company that employs such a person." Mr. Sawyer retorted nonchalantly to President Watson. However, President Watson, with a stern expression, presented a letter. "Did you check which company Brian came from?" He's from our largest client, a major precision equipment manufacturer." Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer turned pale and began to tremble. "No, that can't be. Brian is competent. He got rehired by such a renowned company. That can't be. That's not possible." Mr. Sawyer, trembling, started reading the letter President Watson was holding. And as he understood the content, his face turned pale and he began to shake. The letter stated that there would be a permanent halt in dealings with the major client. And Mr. Sawyer was the reason for it. "Why, I didn't do anything. Read it carefully. It's written that you turned away Brian and unilaterally declared a halt in dealings from your side." "What?" "Of course, my father was the one who sent that document, and I was the one who provided the information. Deals with my father's company accounted for 30% of my former company's total dealings. Therefore, not being able to deal with us would be a significant loss. Based on this, I had James conduct interviews with the subordinates. It seems you've been giving unreasonable orders and verbal abuse for some time. No, I never. Maybe I got a bit too passionate in my guidance and went too far. I've heard that it was because of this that Brian was forced to leave. Mr. Sawyer, glared at by President Watson, began to desperately make excuses while his mouth trembled. That's not true. That incompetent Brian is trying to set me up. It's not just Brian. Other subordinates have also reported verbal abuse and terrible behavior from you. Presented with evidence by President Watson, Mr. Sawyer collapsed to his knees. Watching Mr. Sawyer, President Watson declared calmly, "Mr. Sawyer, as of today, you will relinquish your position as department head." Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer covered his face with both hands and started shaking, crying. Later, President Watson visited my father's company to ask if they would consider resuming business with them. I apologize for the great rudeness and inconvenience caused by Mr. Sawyer. I will take responsibility for his guidance. If his behavior does not improve, we will consider taking disciplinary action. It's a presumptuous request, but could we possibly resume our business dealings? I had no grudge against President Watson. On the contrary, I was grateful for the employment until recently. After discussing with my father, we decided to resume the business dealings. Hearing this, President Watson grasped my hand and expressed his gratitude. Half a year later, a former subordinate invited me for a meal and shared what happened afterward. "Brian, it was quite a mess after that." The subordinate seemed eager to tell me. Following the incident, Mr. Sawyer's erratic guidance and abusive behavior came to light, but the company's regulations did not lead to his dismissal. Instead, Mr. Sawyer was demoted to a regular employee, and his salary was significantly reduced. He was given a completely different job, spending all day organizing files in the storeroom. I thought this was lenient enough, but it seems Mr. Sawyer couldn't accept the punishment. Angry about having to do boring work alone in a room after previously commanding many subordinates, he resigned on his own. However, after learning about the circumstances of his resignation, his wife, dismayed by his selfish behavior, left him and they divorced. He had a son, but the son also left with his mother, leaving Mr. Sawyer all alone. After sharing this, the subordinate's face brightened. With Mr. Sawyer gone and James joining us, working in sales has become much easier. James, my successor, became the manager after Mr. Sawyer's resignation. He even came to the drinking party today and greeted me. "Thanks to you organizing the team so well, I've been able to manage somehow even though I'm new to this position. I truly appreciate it." "Not at all. I had heard rumors about your competence before. I'm really grateful to you." It seems James wanted to express his gratitude to me directly. James, who is competent and kind, was a stark contrast to Mr. Sawyer, despite both being elites. He evaluated my work instead of judging me based on my university, which made me genuinely happy. It was a moment when I felt all my hard work had paid off. After eating and chatting together, James and I became friends. Being suddenly promoted to sales manager, James asked me various questions, eager to do his best for the workplace. Seeing James's dedication made me genuinely happy. With Mr. Sawyer gone, the sales department's atmosphere brightened, and sales performance significantly improved. This experience reaffirmed to me how much workplace atmosphere and leadership can impact work. I was motivated to work hard in my current position. I later learned that President Watson hadn't intended to let Mr. Sawyer resign. In fact, if Mr. Sawyer had shown remorse and worked diligently for about 3 months, arrangements were made for him to return to his original position. There's no such thing as a boring job. He wanted him to regain the earnestness he had when he was a newcomer. This was President Watson's final act of kindness, but unfortunately, it seems Mr. Sawyer didn't grasp this sentiment. Without valuing his duties, Mr. Sawyer left the company without understanding President Watson's intentions. Mr. Sawyer attempted to find new employment, but his age made it difficult to get hired. Even when he found a new place to work, it seems he just couldn't tolerate being treated as a newcomer. He was dismissed for being arrogant towards supervisors younger than himself and for having a bad attitude. He continued to hop from job to job and is now surviving on day-to-day work. Since then, I've continued to apply my past experiences and my new role in sales. As I learned from this incident, I'm not just focused on improving my own performance, but I'm also committed to enhancing the overall atmosphere of the department. I'm putting a lot of effort into training the juniors, and thanks to that, I'm well regarded by my subordinates and colleagues at the new company. I'm truly grateful to James for helping me realize this. I aim to continue valuing the experiences gained from my previous company and clients, and to further contribute to the growth of my family's company. I'm determined to work hard to repay the trust and patience my father and brother had in me.